We have 43 minutes. Oh, we're now recording the meeting. So just to clarify the record, we have provided the COVID teleconference instructions already. We've taken a roll call and Directors Bowders, Gaio, and Vela are present. Director Wengraf is absent and Director Hardy is absent. At this time, I'm calling for public comment, and members of the public have up to 3 minutes to speak for an item not on this agenda. Did we receive any public comment cards?
No public comment.
Okay, and there are no hands raised. Director Wengraf is again in the attendee box, and there we go. So
There we go.
Okay. Susan, if you could unmute yourself just so that we could note that you're here for the record.
Thank you. Sorry for the problems. Can
Okay,
you hear
no,
me?
we
Can you hear me?
we can hear you. Yep. So
Okay, great.
please let the record note that at public comment, Director Wengraf was noted present.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So let's see, that brings us to agenda item number 3, which is the resolution for AB 361. Members, are there any questions? This is what allows us to continue operating via teleconference for the next 30-day period. Seeing no questions, are there any comments from the public? Do we receive any comments? Okay, there's no public comment, so we'll move to action. Is there anybody who wishes to make a motion on this item?
So move.
Second,
Motion by Gaio, second by Wengraf to approve the resolution. Please call the roll.
Director Gaio,
Aye.
Gaio, aye. Director Vela,
Aye.
Vela, aye. Director Wenraf,
aye.
Wenraf, aye. Director Bowders,
Aye.
Bowders, aye. Director Hardy, Hardy absent.
Okay, motion passes. The resolution is approved. Item 4 is the meeting minutes for October 28th, 2021. Are there any comments or questions? Seeing none, is there any public comment?
No public comments.
Seeing none, is there a motion for the minutes?
Move
So
approval.
move. Second.
Motion by Wengraf, second by Gaio to approve the minutes. Please call the roll.
Director Gaio,
Aye.
Gaio, aye. Director Vela,
I'm gonna abstain.
Vela abstain. Director Wenraf,
Aye.
Wenraf, aye. Director Bowders,
Aye.
Bowders, aye. Director Hardy, Hardy absent.
Okay, motion passes. Minutes are approved. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the JPA proposed meeting schedule for calendar year 2022. Members, if you just take a look, we are aligning with the 9 o'clock start time. All these meetings will continue to be via video conference unless and until either the state of emergency is lifted or this board chooses not to adopt a resolution in compliance with AB 361. So for right now, the listing is considered virtual, and their in-person opportunity for public members at the office on Embarcadero Street remains in effect. This continues our practice of having the 4th Thursday of the month be the meeting time. Note that we have, since we started a year or so ago, we're not going to meet in August. That's stricken, so there's no August meeting proposed, and that as always, November and December are moved to the 3rd Thursdays of the month to accommodate the holiday calendar. Is there anybody who has wants to flag any of these dates or issues now? Obviously, if we need to amend the calendar, we've done that in the past once or twice. We can simply do that with notice and an agenda item to change a regular meeting. Are there any questions or comments about any of these dates? I'm sensitive in particular to religious holidays. If there is a conflict with a religious holiday that folks are aware of, I'm not seeing any here, so I don't have any concerns myself, but just want to check to see if others had anything. Okay, seeing no questions or comments, are there any members of the public to comment on this item?
There are no comments.
Okay, public comment is closed, and at this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve the calendar.
So approved.
Second.
Okay, I'm gonna, on that one, motion is gonna go to Wengraf, second to Vela, please, and please call the roll.
Director Gaio,
Aye.
Gaio, aye. Director Vela,
Aye.
Vela, aye. Director Wenraf,
Aye.
Wenraf, aye. Director Bowders,
Aye.
Bowders, aye. Director Hardy, Hardy absent.
Okay, the calendar is approved. Thank you. That will take us to item number 6, which is the director's report, and Director Brooks.
Yes, good morning, directors. I am just so impressed and amazed by Director Vella's multitasking abilities. I just have to say it. That's wonderful. It's great to see. Let's see, I believe Ruben's going to share my slides for the director's report. I have 2 slides that unfortunately I need to share with the board. The selfish part of me wanted to leave these slides to the very end because I just wasn't sure if I could maintain my composure after presenting them, but I do want to share a couple of slides with you if Ruben has control of the PowerPoint slides, and I don't know if he does.
I'm pulling them up now, Larry. Give me a minute.
Thank you very much, sir. And those slides, I'll tell you, have to do with the sad reality here that we did lose County Supervisor Wilma Chan. And there will be a celebration of life planned for next month in December by the Board of Supervisors. And there will be a memorial fund that will be established in her memory, and I don't have all the details yet with regards to the celebration of life, nor the information about the memorial fund. If you go to the county website and you click on the link there where it talks about memorial fund, you can get more information. But this statement by the Board of Supervisors is now on the county website, and all the other county agencies have made some type of statement. If you go to the next slide, Ruben, yeah, part of the reason why I was pretty shaken up by this was just the day before Supervisor Chan had given me the proclamation that you see on your right there for National Child Lead Poisoning Prevention Week. And that will, of course, mark the last time that she will present me with that. That proclamation, I asked that staff will hang it up somewhere prominently, seen by the public. You also note there that on our county website, we do have a statement, a picture of Supervisor Chan, and at the bottom there is a statement, and that statement is on all of our social media now. And with that, I do want to thank our Director Botters for reaching out to me when this all happened and directing me to put out a statement, because as I said, I was pretty much in shock and not thinking at the time, and Director Botters did guide me in terms of putting out a statement for the JPA. In fact, I believe if it was not the first, it was one of the first statements to come out from the county. And so I just want to thank you, Director Botters, for your compassion and your leadership at that particular point in time, because I was feeling kind of lost, and I appreciated you telling me what I needed to do there. So before I go into any other slides related to the director's report, I just wanted to leave this open for a moment to see if Director Botters or any other directors wanted to say anything.
Thank you, Larry. Are there any directors who would like to comment at this time about any part of Supervisor Chan's tenure on this board, or in relation to her very untimely and inappropriate passing, in my opinion? But I would also like to just ask if Jared would like to say anything.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually would. This is Jared Stavis, and I have been with Supervisor Chan for 5 years now. Yeah, it's been, I just wanted to say thank you to Director Botters and to the entire JPA for their statement, and Larry for this presentation today. It's very much appreciated. It's been a very difficult time, and it's been just devastating to lose Supervisor Chan, but our work is going to continue. I'm sure, as you all know, our Chief of Staff, Dave Brown, has been appointed supervisor in her stead to serve the remainder of her term, which will be this year and all of next year. So Supervisor Brown is continuing her legacy. He's committed to completing the work that Supervisor Chan has started, including, work that this body does. So you have our commitment. That work will continue, but we're still, still dealing with the loss. But I just wanted to thank you all for your kind wishes. And just to Larry's point, I just want to say the public memorial will be on December 8th, and it will be at 2 p.m. at the Oakland Museum, 2 to 4, and it's open, like I said, open to the public, and we would love to have all of you attend if you're able. It'll be outdoors in the courtyard area. So again, that's December 8th from 2 to 4 p.m. at the Oakland Museum. And again, thank you all for your kind wishes. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Jared. Is there any other director who wishes to make a comment? Director Vella.
I just wanted to recognize, some of the legislation and some of the work that Supervisor Chan was really instrumental in, specific to this board. And, we've talked about, making things safer for our kids. She carried legislation that really made it so that we didn't have lead in our pipes. We didn't have, that we noted and removed and documented any sort of cancer causing chemicals and things like that. I think at least when I think about Supervisor Chan, I really think about all of the work that she really did that was the cornerstone and foundation for families, for kids, for early childhood education. And I think we spend a lot of time on this board talking about those impacts. And so her, losing her is a big loss to this effort and this work. But I think she established a really strong and broad foundation for us to build off of. So I know I'm going to miss her. I often called her for projects in Alameda, and she was always willing to step in, really understood the role of supervisor in terms of providing services, making sure that we're engaged in helping people who need the most help. And one of the last projects that we worked on with her in Alameda was our wellness center. So just a huge loss. And thank you, Director Bowders, for making sure that we had a statement that was put out. This hits home for me on many, many levels. She was killed not far from my house and doing something that we all do, which is she was out for a walk in the morning. And I know we all work on traffic safety at our own city councils, and we had been talking about traffic safety efforts in Alameda for many years now. And so it's just a kind of compounded thing for us in Alameda, where we're trying to make sure that we're addressing traffic safety for all modes, pedestrians, cyclists, as well as making sure that we have safe routes to school. And she was walking not far from a school. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Vella. Are there others who wish to make a comment? Well, what I'll just say is Supervisor Chan was an extraordinary human being, and similar to her, but not in a candle to candle sense. I have always been interested in public service due to my interest in public health and the role that housing plays in healthcare. And my professional background brought me to public service after years of doing work with immigrant communities, low income tenants. And to me, she really was the beacon on the Board of Supervisors for those issues. Her focus on homes and children and families and immigrants very on a personal level resonated with me. So it was second nature for me to reach out to Larry when I learned about this tragedy. And I just really feel that the county is deeply indebted to her for her years of public service. She was not a flashy elected official trying to steal a headline. She was a very grounded and a very grounded person. I'll just leave it at that. I think she was a very grounded person, and those are the best types of people in public service, in my opinion. And so we experienced an immense loss. And I thank Jared for being here, and I send my best wishes to every member of her staff who I know is going through a very traumatic time right now. And I hope that if you, Jared, or anyone else in your office needs anything from this agency or any of its members, that you will not hesitate to reach out to us to support you with that. So, yep. You want to say something? You came back on camera. You're on mute.
I just wanted to say thank you for that. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
That offer, much appreciated.
You're welcome. So with that, thank you, Larry, for we'll be adjourning today in her memory. That will be in the minutes. And but I just wanted to thank you for keeping that at the top of the agenda today. Is there, before I move on, is there any public comment on this item? I know there's more to this report. No? Okay, go ahead,
There's no
Larry.
public comment.
Thank you. Go ahead, Larry.
Oh, so moving on to next slide here, the Detroit lead listening tour. You know, in light of this whole thing with COVID and virtual conferences and webinars and stuff, I find myself busier than ever before, but no longer in the way that I've been pampered in the past, as far as all expense paid trips to Detroit and Pittsburgh and DC and things of that nature. I'm doing a lot of webinars, being invited to speak on panels. So I have one tomorrow, Detroit lead listening tour, where we're going to talk about using lead poisoning data as a tool for collaboration, equity, and impact. And I'm going to be talking a lot about Oakland's Race and Equity Impact Assessment Report, which I've been sharing at other virtual conferences and webinars as well. Last week it was Pittsburgh Women for a Healthy Environment, which, if you switch over to this next slide here, thank you, Ruben. They're doing a series, and I note that these groups are finding these organizations like, you know, with Detroit, it was Bennett Midland, with the Women for a Healthy Environment. In Pittsburgh, it's the Heinz Endowment. But they're finding people to help sponsor these conferences, and I'm hoping that Healthy Homes Department will be able to do something similar. But for now, I'm content being invited to speak on these various panels and being part of some of these recordings. This particular one I was invited to speak on was Life Without Lead in County Solutions. I participated as a participant in the lead data presentation, but not as a speaker. I was an attendee, and I found that very enlightening, the information that was being presented. And again, I was able to share in comments afterwards, questions and answers about the Oakland Race and Equity Impact Assessment Report. Next slide here is with regards to efforts being made. As I mentioned last month, we were one of the founding members of the California Healthy Housing Coalition, which is made up of various organizations, both private, nonprofit, tenants' rights groups, landlord groups, code enforcement, healthy housing, asthma prevention programs. And we come together in order to try to sponsor legislation that will help support our efforts. Again, we, the Healthy Homes Department, cannot be a function as lobbyists, but our function on the Healthy Housing Coalition is to provide education so that they can then formulate bills, and then they can lobby. So one of the bills that we have helped them decide they want to sponsor is one that will refund the code enforcement incentive and the community code enforcement pilot program grants. Those laws were put on the books back in 2000 to provide money to incentivize code enforcement officers to do good works. And the angle here for the California Healthy Housing Coalition in terms of that particular piece of legislation refunding those grants is to incentivize the code enforcement officers to begin doing inspections for lead hazards. And so as you can see in this email over to the right, I mentioned how I really wasn't surprised that the California Association of Code Enforcement Officers has agreed to co-sponsor this bill to replenish those grant funds. But what really surprised me was the fact that the 3 lobbyists that the Code Enforcement Association has hired to do a lot of their lobbying made reference to an article yesterday when I was talking to them. They talked about an article that had just come out in the Sacramento Bee about the lead poisoning in Sacramento and how Sacramento has one of the highest rates of lead poisoning taking place there. And they were talking to Jeff Van Slooten in that article about ways to prevent children from being lead poisoned. But it struck me when they said that legislators, because they work in Sacramento, they're always tuned into what's going on in their own backyard, even though they live in other parts of the state, but they work there. And so these lobbyists felt that in light of the series of articles the Sacramento Bee is doing on lead poisoning prevention, it was going to make our efforts to get those grant funds put back into those programs a lot easier. In defense of Jeff, he's holding a magnifying glass. That is a prop. He is a state certified lead inspector risk assessor. He uses an X-ray fluorescent device to determine levels of lead. But the name of his company is Lead Detective. So in his defense, I guess he wanted to use that, or maybe the reporters gave him that prop for that picture, but that's not what he uses to inspect for lead. And in fact, he just handed over his business to his son, who's the next generation of lead detectives. And he is now a consultant for Forensics Analytical, which is a company that we've had a lot of great experience with. So some of the staff will recognize that name, Forensics Analytical, but he's now a trainer. He teaches courses related to lead inspections for forensics. Next slide. Lead and healthy housing conferences. These are held regionally. They're pre-pandemic, there was always a big national one that was sponsored by HUD and also the National Environmental Health Association. We've had the pleasure of being participants in these conferences for many years in person. I know Dale Hagan, our deputy director, who's really considered like one of the foremost experts on HUD lead hazard control grants, has been asked to speak at some of these conferences. We've also, speaking of all expense paid, we've been actually invited to meet with people from other states at those conferences to share information on work that we're doing. In fact, one of those conferences, we were brought a foundation paid for us to have a luncheon with folks from Cleveland to talk about our program and our JPA. And as a result, they now have a program where they're doing proactive rental inspection programs and they're including inspections for lead. But at this Lead and Healthy Housing Conference, we just received an email yesterday about this video presentation on neighborhood-based approach for monitoring child exposure to lead. And it's really a fascinating video that I intend to share with the City of Oakland lead paint negotiations team, because I think it speaks a lot to some of the strategies that they're proposing in their race and equity impact assessment report. And I also plan to share it with the Oakland Unified School District, because they, in this particular presentation, the speaker is talking about what they're doing in her particular city in Texas, working with the school districts to help reduce lead poisoning. I also should add that the next annual conference is planned for being virtual. Again, they're still not quite ready to try to do an in-person conference. And I was asked to speak at the Lead and Healthy Housing Conference in February. And so what I did is I put together a panel of what I call all-star code enforcement managers from across the United States to have a conversation about how code enforcement should be collaborating with environmental health and public health officials in order to reduce lead poisoning. And then my last slide for the director's report is kind of my happy face here, since I started off with a pretty sad face. I want to give props to our education engagement team. I saw this email from Sony Johnson yesterday, and it just like put a smile on my face. They did an event at Hoover Elementary School, and right now the theme that they've introduced to everyone as part of Lead Poisoning Prevention Week was "Take Action, Be a Hero." And so that was the theme for this event. So that's why you see folks wearing their hero masks. And it looked like it was a great event, good turnout. I think it's one of our first post COVID in-person events, and it appears that it was very successful. So I just want to give props out to them for that effort. And that is my last slide for the director's report.
Thank you, Larry. Are there any questions about the director's report? Seeing none, are there any public comments on the director's report?
No public comment.
Okay, thank you for the director's report. That will close that item, and scroll back on my thing here. And that will take us to agenda item number 7, which is a presentation on how does Alameda County compare? And who will be giving this presentation?
Ruben.
Okay, welcome, Ruben.
Hi, thank you, Director Bowders. Let me just get started here. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to present again before your board. As mentioned, I'm Ruben Briones, Special Projects Coordinator, and today I'm going to present some data to help answer some questions that were brought up in last month's meeting. Just a quick clarification, this is a photo from not during COVID, but in the before times when we were able to gather together. So I just want to clarify that real quick. So just to jog your memory, at the last meeting, Director Wengraf asked 2 questions. In particular, she wanted to have an understanding if there's a trend downward towards lead poisoning. And Director Brooks, alluded to the fact that at that time we were still higher than Flint, Michigan, and that in particular Fruitvale was ground zero. And then another question that Director Wengraf asked was about how we compare in regards to other counties. So I'm going to be providing some information to help answer those 2 questions. So let's start right in. First, let's look at how the Childhood Lead Poisoning Prevention Program has performed over the past few years. This graph tracks the overall percentage of children who have been lead exposed over 4.5 micrograms per deciliter since 2007. The percentage each year has been small and has been steadily decreasing to the most recent percentage in 2019, where we're at 1.92%. So now let's talk about Fruitvale. In 2012, Director Brooks correctly pointed out that the 94601 zip code had the highest percentage of children lead exposed at 7.57%, which indeed was higher than 5% that Flint, Michigan had at that time. However, you can also see that there were multiple number of zip codes that were high, mostly in the East Oakland area, but there is one Fremont zip code that's in there. This data was not too surprising because in 2010, the zip code map for areas of accumulated risk, I pointed out that these very same zip codes have the highest potential for children to be lead exposed. Just last month, the California branch of the Lead Poisoning Prevention Department released data showing the 100 zip codes in California with the highest percent of children with elevated lead level for 2019. In that list, there were 3 zip codes from Alameda County. Number 3 on that list is the Blackout neighborhood in Fremont. Next, at number 7 is another Fremont zip code in North Fremont. And number 17 is still the Fruitville zip code 94601. Fruitville zip code improved from 7.57% of children tested being lead exposed to now 2.55. And it's lower on the list of zip codes with high exposure. So Fruitville is doing great, but what is happening with Fremont? In order to find out more about why Fremont, I looked at the most recent findings on sources of lead exposure in California. Here we find out that in California for fiscal year 2018, 51% of the sources of lead were non-housing related. While the report highlights the high number of Afghan children as the leading cause, Alameda County has another factor too. First, let me highlight a few more findings. Housing related were the main sources for non-Hispanic Black children and for Hispanic children. It was a mixture of both housing and non-housing sources for Hispanic children. For Afghan children, the non-housing sources were cosmetic and cultural products. So I think one of the important factors here to point out is that for the time being, non-housing sources of lead are really prevalent and are really the major cause of what's giving us a high percentage of children lead exposed. So knowing that the major sources of lead poisoning are non-housing helps explain why in the last 5 years, Alameda County has, yes, a high number of Afghan children lead exposed, but also look at the high number of Indo-American children that have come back lead exposed. We looked at this data almost a year ago, and now we can correlate that why Fremont zip codes are some of the highest in California. Through the chair, any questions on this data before we move on to compare the county performance to other counties?
Are there any directors who have questions about the presentation we've received thus far? I got to scroll through to see if your hands are up. I see no questions so far, so Ruben, you can continue.
Okay. All right, for fiscal year 2018, the state provided data comparison for 39 counties and 3 cities. The rest of the state counties were compressed into 1. So to the question, how does Alameda County compare? Alameda County ranks 33rd among the reporting entities at 2.22%. While this is on the lower end, there are several factors to consider that is contributing to Alameda County's performance. Some counties have a different makeup in terms of population, density, older housing, number of children, etc. So now let's focus in on some of these factors. So first, I looked at the performance of the county in comparison to similar sized counties. Our county is very similar to Sacramento County. But Sacramento County has a higher rate of children that are lead exposed. However, we are behind Santa Clara County, who has a slightly better performance. They also have a slightly more children in population, but we're very close to in numbers to them, and our performance is slightly behind them. If all the counties had the same population, then the county's performance would be slightly above average. Our rate of 22 lead exposed children per 100K is 16th among the 40 counties that were reporting. However, if we look at the county's performance by comparing the equal rates of Medi-Cal children under 6, our performance is not so great. More children in poverty are getting lead exposed in comparison with other counties. This is definitely an opportunity area for the county. Okay, so beginning to wrap up, let's go back again to the county's performance since 2007. From 2007 to 2019, Alameda County has had a 57% reduction of young children being lead exposed. The next closest county in terms of performance is Santa Clara County. They have a similar size population, similar makeup, and they're right next door. At this point, Alameda County is improving at a faster rate than Santa Clara. And if we continue to improve at this rate, we can surpass them and continue to keep our county's children healthy and safe. Any questions at this point?
Thank you, Ruben. Are there any directors who have questions for Ruben about the presentation? Director Wengraf?
Well, first of all, I want to thank Ruben for the report. Very much appreciate your putting time and energy into giving us all of this data. I guess my concern is with the influx of Afghani refugees into the county. And it's not necessarily a housing issue, and I know it may fall outside of our authority, but it would seem to me that we need to encourage some other agency to do some pretty robust outreach in terms of education to that community in terms of exposure. This may be a whole new area for them, and they're going through, a traumatic transition. But I'm concerned about the influx, since you've targeted that community as having very, very high levels of lead exposure. I think we need to alert the other agencies about this problem.
So Sony's hand is raised. Are one or both of you going to take that question?
I'll let Sony take that question.
Okay, Sony, go ahead.
Yeah, so we are already on the ground with a number of task force that we're collaborating with. We've reached out to not only the relocation agencies, but all of the clinics. We have language, all of our materials that are specific to the Afghani language, which is Pashto and Dari, and we've gotten them out to the clinics. And so as soon as the families have their children lead screened, we have our resources available, because our experience is that the majority of children and families are not being exposed due to property related hazards, but they're coming in already lead exposed due to hazards from their home country. And so our hope is to get into those houses, into those families as soon as possible, so that we can explain to them the hazards of the concerns about lead screening. And so we actually have been on these task force for about 3 months now. We have weekly meetings, and we are with all of the players and the partners within Alameda County. We're very well connected, and we're already on the ground. So that's a great question. There's over 120,000 Afghan refugees that are planning to come to Alameda County. And so we've already started the outreach, but great question. We've all been very, very nervous. And so we've gotten started early.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sony. Thank you.
And to expand on that, Director Wengraf, because I think he brought up a good point that reminds me of during a period of time when we were discovering a lot of children in the Fremont area were being lead exposed from certain herbs and religious makeup that they were using. I did form some ties with the city manager, mayor, city council, and also their chamber of commerce. and I don't think we've strengthened those ties or reestablished them, because that was a few years ago. So I think that you brought up a good point in terms of reaching out and informing folks of this challenge, this problem. The other thing we've been doing is we've been talking to the State Department of Public Health about what are you guys going to do to increase funding for our nursing case management. This influx, combined with the Center for Disease Control lowering the action threshold, it was 5 micrograms per deciliter. They've now concluded that it should be 3.5 micrograms per deciliter should be when you take some action to try to help reduce a child's lead level, while at the same time acknowledging that there really is no safe level of lead in the blood. And really, we should be doing something about any child that has even a slight elevated level. And so we've been talking to the State Department of Public Health Child Lead Poisoning Prevention Branch in terms of, are you going to increase our grant so that maybe we can do more in terms of addressing this issue? Having some discussions, internal discussions about what other funding sources exist within the county that may be able to help us address this. You know, can some of the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funds be used for something like this, boomerang funds? I mean, we're just desperate for any funds because we know that this problem is just going to grow.
Okay, thank you. Director Gaia.
Yes, thank you for the information, and I do appreciate the progress that has been made. But based on the data you presented and based on the hearsay in the neighborhood, we still have a problem. We still have an emergency for many, many years. And certainly it impacts certain communities in the city of Oakland. But we're still talking about, well, we're going to do this, do that. So for me, it's very clear, you know, one is beyond the education. What is it? I mean, you brought earlier that you needed more enforcement or code enforcement inspectors. You know, what is it that Oakland has to do, specifically the Fruitvale area, since that was one of the emergency centers in the county, throughout the state and the United States of America, but we're still talking about the problem. And what is it that we can do more specifically in the immediate areas that we already declared emergencies to address the problem, to be able to solve the problem? And because, you know, we're talking about children. And so what is it that we need to do here in Oakland, where I don't know what the latest is regarding the negotiations in terms of the money allocation regarding the lead issue. But, you know, we talk a lot about race and equity, but yet we keep talking about it. And we know what the data is. And I've grown up here in East Oakland, and certainly I can tell you when it comes to violence, who's doing what to whom, but we're talking about it. So what will the county do immediately to get beyond, what is it, the 2% or whatever the number is, to be able to bring the solution to make sure that the children that are here do not continue to be impacted? But because I would think by now we would know what properties, what locations, and what the issue is that's creating the lead problem, because we've been at this for many years. And so I don't, you know, to the director, I'm not quite sure what else we need to present or do. But if you're asking for more support with the code enforcement, I certainly, you know, would do anything that I can within my authority to help you address that issue. Because otherwise it becomes like all the other issues. Everything's an emergency when it comes to public safety. But we grew up and live in it, and after a while it becomes the norm and we get used to it. So I guess the question I have, what is it that we need to do to
Director
be able
Guy,
to get to a greater, safer neighborhood in Oakland?
Director Gaio, I'd be happy to try to answer that, because I was a little bit surprised by the data showing the decline in the Fruitvale district, and want to do more research into that, because the question I immediately had when Ruben was sharing this report with me was, well, well, what happened over the last 5 years? Fruitvale still has pre-1978 housing. Is it gentrification? Are people coming in there and addressing the lead hazards? Is it because of affordable housing? Are people of color moving out of Fruitvale and maybe moving out of Oakland? And so is that bringing down the numbers? Is it, children aren't being blood lead tested? We know these last few years with the pandemic, a lot of kids have not been tested. That slide I showed earlier about the folks in Texas and the great things that they're doing with the school districts, is it that we need to form a better collaboration with Oakland Unified School District to get them to encourage more blood lead testing? There are some states where the school districts actually require kids to be tested before they can come to school so that they know if they need to be put in special ed classes or not. I think some of these questions that both you and I are having, the key is going to be in terms of the lead paint settlement dollars and the race and equity study and how that is applied, because I know right now in terms of their race and equity impact assessment report, they're saying too that Bancroft Havens Court is more ground zero than Fruitvale. They're mentioning Brookfield Village as another place that is most vulnerable. You may recall that they did show a slide to the JPA back on September 8th when they were presenting us with the summary of the Race and Equity Impact Assessment Report, where they identified those areas as being most vulnerable. And I don't know, my gut still says Fruitvale is still the most vulnerable place. The data suggests that I'm wrong, but my gut tells me different. And I'll go into more detail when we get into the lead settlement negotiations update.
Thank you.
If I could just add,
considering the role that I play here with you, I think and I appreciate the leadership that's with us, but what is it that Oakland specifically needs to do to work with you, to be able to protect and save our children? And so I'm ready to listen and to be willing to work with you directly to get this thing resolved. Because there's still a challenge what Alameda County does and what the city of Oakland does. And the ones at the end of the day that pay the price are the kids and families in our neighborhood. So I thank you for the information, and I look forward to being more specific and working with you. Thank you.
Ruben?
Before we do that, if we could take the shared screen down. I've been waiting to find the right time to do that. Thank you. Okay. Ruben, did you want to add anything to that?
Yes, if I could just add, when Director Brooks did ask me, well, why did Fruitvale improve so much? I think he was looking to see what were some of the lessons that we can learn from that. And what I started to do some preliminary look at the data, and there's probably a number of factors, but one of the factors that I was able to glean out of the data is that there are changing demographics. The data that I looked back at 2014 showed that there were a significant number of Afghan children that contributed to the percentage of lead-exposed children in that year. However, when you look at 2019, that percentage of Afghan children has gone down. And it's probably a leading contributor to why overall the percentage in Fruitvale is coming down. Having said that, there are still a significant number of Black and Latino children in that zip code. And so that has not changed from 2014 to 2019. So I think that goes to what Director Brooks was saying in terms of that there are still needs in that zip code, in particular for both the Black and Latino children.
Director Gallo, do you wish to add anything to that? There you go. His hand.
I had my hand up. I'm sorry, but I look forward to being more direct and working with our director to be able to address to some of the specifics here in the city of Oakland, and also as well as education. Having served on the Oakland Board of Education, certainly the way we do things here in Oakland are a little different sometimes, and we need all the help we can get. So thank you, Mr. Brooks, for your leadership. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. And it sounds like maybe Director Brooks, it would be great to just have an office to office meeting with Director Gaios and his staff, because they're really invested in on the ground inside their community. And so I think he's speaking to the opportunity that's presented with his presence on this board, and the fact that you know, I was always troubled that Emeryville was on the top 5 lists, the top 5 list for so long in California, behind Fruitvale and San Antonio neighborhoods for lead exposure. And I'm happy to see we didn't apparently make the top 100 this time around. So that was a huge, we've put a whole bunch of, you know, things in place to do that. And we're a much smaller community than East Oakland is. So I think maybe it would be helpful for staff to set up time directly with Director Gaio to talk about what has worked in other communities, what could work, and what ways we can help take down some of the bureaucratic barriers that are preventing us from putting money out into the community to address these issues. But I agree that the statistics and the data and the sources are an important place to start. And so this was a timely and appropriate presentation to receive. Does that sound like that makes sense to you, Director Brooks?
Yes.
Great. Okay, well, we'll close this item and thank everyone for that presentation, and we'll move to item 8, which is the lead settlement negotiations. And Larry, do you have an update for us?
Yes, I have, let's see, 2 slides here, I think that Ruben's going to bring up for me. But I can begin with by just saying that all these various national webinars, panel discussions I've been participating in, oftentimes it's been asked, what are some of the best practices for reducing child lead poisoning rates? And in every instance, near the top of the list is proactive rental inspection program to identify lead hazards. Rochester, New York is considered the gold standard for that. They've reduced their child lead poisoning rate by over 90% over the last 15 years. Because their code enforcement officers are state certified lead inspector risk assessors, and some are lead sampling techs, and they go in and they collect samples and they turn those over to labs, and they're able to identify what areas need to be remediated right away. In the race and equity impact analysis report, which I've been told is a public document now, but that there's been some mix up with the Department of Communications in Oakland, so it hasn't been put on the city's website. And so I hesitate to release it because I do have an advanced copy, and I have reporters and I have community leaders all asking me for it. And I'm like, until, you know, it's on the city's website or there's a press release or something, I just can't share it. But the #1 goal of the race and equity impact analysis is to establish a proactive rental inspection program within the city of Oakland. But I mean, it hinges upon us being able to reach a spending plan agreement, because under the settlement, Oakland and Alameda, unlike other counties, have to reach an agreement. If you go to the next slide, Ruben, you may recall on September 8th, the City of Oakland's negotiation staff did do a presentation, a summary of that report, which is supposedly now public, in which they had asked for 70% of the funds to be used on a number of equity elements. As I said, the #1 being a proactive rental inspection program. Last month, I presented this slide to you showing what our counter proposal was based on their race and equity impact assessment. We offered this proposal that 60% would go to the city, 40% to the county, in part because we also recognize that with the affordable housing crisis, we are seeing a migration of people from Oakland south towards San Leandro, Hayward. In fact, in their race and equity impact assessment report, San Leandro was listed like 3rd or 4th as one of the most vulnerable communities, Hayward right behind that. So we do believe that there is a significant number of lead poisoning will occur in those areas. And so we felt 40% should come to the county. And we were to meet last month, right after the JPA meeting, but that was canceled. We were told at that time that because we had our county council draw up a MOU to be presented to the city and to the county board of supervisors, that the Oakland negotiations team had some questions about the MOU. And so we were prepared with our city attorney, with our county council, to respond to the city and the city attorney's questions with regards to the MOU. But what we ended up learning, that meeting was canceled. There was an emergency meeting scheduled by Oakland. Rather than our usual Thursday meetings like today we're supposed to meet, they scheduled one for last Monday, and the county agreed to that Monday evening meeting, which was held. And we learned then that the city wanted to add a attachment to the MOU, a document that would describe the city's priorities for the use of the settlement funds, which again, one of their priorities is a proactive rental inspection program. But their document described their race and equity focus. And we felt that they gave us the document to review. We felt that it was a good document for the city. In fact, we wanted to add our own priorities. And so we did present that document to the city. They did have some grave concerns about the county's priorities. They felt that they didn't line up with the city's. I can understand why they felt that way, because we did not talk about race and equity in our document. We felt that we wanted to focus primarily on the use of the funds. And we know that the Board of Supervisors is already committed to have a racial justice approach to the use of the funds. In fact, it was announced this week that the county administrator has presented to the Board of Supervisors her plans to establish the county's Office of Race and Equity. So we do know that there will be a racial justice focus to the use of the funds, but the city staff really felt that that there was a need to have further discussions about the MOU because they really want their document to be, if not attached, perhaps even incorporated into the MOU. And my position is that the county would like to see their 40%, and they will apply their race and equity lens to the use of that 40%. And Oakland can use their race and equity lens for their 20%. And the money that is to be spent in Oakland by the county, perhaps the two offices of race and equity can now negotiate how that is spent. But our position, which we will present again today, if there is a meeting, is that the county would like to move forward and have an MOU signed right away to give the county their 40%, Oakland 20%, and we negotiate the rest of it. The City of Oakland staff is assuring me that they think that if we meet today and maybe have a couple of more meetings, that we can reach an agreement on this MOU before the end of the year. And all I can say is we'll have to see if that's correct or not. Meanwhile, I did do a presentation to all of the cities last week. I found out that our own community development agency has a quarterly meeting with all of the other cities, housing community development departments. And so I was asked by our housing community development director to give an update to that group, which I did on Friday. So I can almost safely say that the entire county is now aware of the current situation in terms of the negotiations between the city and the county. Any questions?
Okay, thank you for that presentation. Are there any directors who have questions for Director Brooks regarding the status of the lead settlement negotiation? Director Guy, I was recognized.
Yeah, thank you for that information. And you know, sometimes we in government create the biggest challenge that there is opposed to solving the problem. So, you know, what I like, could I get a copy of the last slide? Is that public?
That's public.
Yeah, if I can see that, and I would like to meet with you, because the information you're giving me is not what I'm receiving at this other end. And I want to get I want to get our families and neighborhoods served. And it's just like professional sports, right? You do one thing, we do another, and then the residents are the ones that pay the price at the end of the day. So look, Director Brooks, if I could just check in with you, because I want to get this resolved, bring it before the council, and let's move forward and get the work done. And I appreciate your work. And I mean, you and I have been at this for many years, and I value the work you do. And sometimes we in government, at the leadership, we get too creative and know everything, but yet I never saw you help me pick up a piece of trash in the neighborhood, but you're going to tell me how to do it, right? So anyways, man, with all due respect, let me get together with you and I'll push your recommendations along. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Director Guy. Are there other directors who have questions or comments? Have we received any public comment on this item, Ladise?
No public comment?
Public comment is closed. The only additional comment I have is thank you for the update. And I would just like to ask if staff could get together with Director Gallo today, if he's available today, and if not tomorrow, since you're going into these continued negotiations and trying to reach a settlement on this MOU, it would be extremely advantageous for this agency to report out before the end of the year that we have resolved the expenditure nature of this agreement and that we are going to be investing this money in remediating and abating lead from communities and impacting children. So we've had this money now for a couple of years after a very long, protracted piece of litigation. And I think it's a unanimous point of view among the members who are here today that we would like to see that money put into action. So I'm hearing that from Director Gallo and the City of Oakland. So let's make that happen, right? Okay. So with that, I will close out agenda item number 8, and I will move to agenda item number 9, which is the October monthly report. Ladise?
Just want to point out a few highlights. As you know, Lead Week, National Lead Prevention Week was October the 24th through the 30th. And as a result, the outreach, education, and engagement team conducted a lot of activities during the month. Some things to highlight is that we participated in a Twitter chat led by the National Center for Healthy Housing. We also did a lot of radio campaigns, broadcast in Pandora, Bonneville, and Univision, and also iHeartRadio. Let's see. We also ran week-long online newspaper ads in Oakland side and Berkeley side, as well as Alameda Sun newspapers. And we utilized the e-subscribe newsletter to promote Healthy Homes contest kit giveaway, which included items such as a HEPA vacuum, microfiber cloths, and cleaning supplies. That's all I have for the monthly report.
Thank you. Are there questions to clarify anything about the October monthly report? Seeing none, is there public comment on the October monthly report?
No public comment.
Seeing none, are there any further items to discuss? Seeing none, we'll move from agenda item number 9 to agenda item 10. Are there any future agenda items that directors wish to have placed on this agenda for a future meeting? Seeing none, we'll move to, is there any public comment on future agenda items?
No public comment.
Okay, moving to agenda item number 11, announcements by members of the Board of Directors. I have one, which is just to remind everybody that National Transgender Day of Remembrance is November 20th, which will be on Saturday this year. And so if you are not familiar with it and you would like to learn more about how transgender women of color in particular have been subjected to higher rates of violence in our communities, and would like to learn how you can be of support, you can reach out to me by email or phone. I'd be happy to talk to you about ways in which your local city can be supportive of members of the transgender community. With that, we reach agenda item number 12, which is adjournment. The time is 10:08, and I'm going to ask for 1 minute of silence in memory of Wilma Chan. May God rest her soul. The time is 10:09 and this meeting is adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a nice holiday.
Yeah. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.